Thanks, everybody. Welcome to Build. I'm your host, Ricky Camilleri. Director, actor Rob Reiner has never been one to shy away from his opinion, especially when it comes to the atrocities and lies of both our current administration and the second Bush administration. His new film, Shock and Awe, traces the lead up to the war in Iraq and the Night Ritter journalists, the ones who got it right, the team that actually did their job and listened to sources rather than the press releases put out by Cheney and Rumsfeld. Let's take a look at the trailer for Shock and Awe.
Simply stated, there is no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction.
They're dialing up the rhetoric on Iraq. Let's see if we can nail them down, okay? Let's get to work.
We're working on a theory that the administration has already decided to go to war and is now focused on how to justify it.
It's not a theory.
We're working on something important. That's why I'm here, to make you an offer.
It's Joe Galloway.
Wow.
Man even walks like he has a Bronze Star.
What do you want to know?
Everything the administration doesn't want us to know.
A secret war planning group has been set up in the building where I work.
And which building is that?
The one with 5 sides.
How real is the chatter about Iraq?
Very. Are you looking into an Iraqi connection?
No one's actually come out and said anything publicly. Maybe it's just backroom speculation.
Can't we hit it harder than this?
I know that a man named Ahmed Shalabi wants to replace Saddam Hussein, that the neocons are pushing for the invasion, and you are quickly becoming my favorite writer. Wow.
Proof is coming from every major media outlet in the country, except yours.
All right, aren't we?
I'm speaking to you because I'm an American citizen and I don't like what these people are doing.
You got to see this.
What do we do?
When the government says something, you only have one question to ask. Is it true?
Search is underway to find those responsible.
We write for people whose kids get sent to war. Our readers need to know.
The president's going to invade Iraq. We're going to run her whether he comments or not.
The president is lying.
He's lying!
Here's the setup.
There's always something you don't see coming.
They don't care about the truth. If they want a war, they're going to get one.
Shock and awe.
Shock and awe.
I say in all due respect, sir, my sources might even be in this room.
Did you actually have sources in the room?
No. But it was fun watching them sweat like whores in church.
Everybody, the great Rob Reiner.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, sir.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you again. Thank you so much for being here.
Yes.
Let's talk about so many things, because you're good at talking about a number of things.
We can talk about whatever you want.
But let's talk about this movie.
Sex, religion, politics, I don't care.
I don't know if I need your advice on sex, but we'll move on.
Okay, maybe I need your advice.
Shock and Awe. Let's first start with Shock and Awe, because what I love about you telling this story right now is it feels like you're going back to the beginning of something. At least that's what it felt like for me in terms of how we look at the mainstream media right now, how it's been weaponized,
right,
and how it was weaponized then, and how the public discourse around our government, our distrust of it, and our distrust of media, sort of where the mud started being collected and things started getting gray. Is that what attracted you to this story?
Well, to be honest, that's a big part of it. And there's a quote at the beginning of the movie by Bill Moyers, who was a press secretary to Lyndon Johnson, and it basically talks about how in order for democracy to survive, we need a free and independent press. That is a basic foundation for democracy. But to be honest with you, what attracted to me to the story, I mean, it's a real story. I was of draft age, during the Vietnam War. And I just never thought in my lifetime we'd be going to war twice based on lies. Because I knew going up as we led to the war in Iraq that there was no foundation. There was no real justification. There was no connection to Saddam Hussein. There was no ability for these aluminum tubes to enrich uranium. There certainly were no weapons of mass destruction. And yet we saw ourselves inexorably marching towards war. And there's a line in the movie where one of the journalists says, it's like watching your child run into the street and feeling helpless to protect them and stop them from getting hit by the truck. And that's what I felt was going to happen. So in 2003, I wanted to tell this story. How did we get here? How did this happen? And I tried. At first, I thought maybe I'll do it as a, as a satire, like a Dr. Strangelove kind of thing. But it didn't work out. I couldn't get a good script. I tried again with a different tact. It didn't work. And then I saw a documentary by Bill Moyers about these 4 journalists from Knight Ridder News who basically got it all right. They got everything right. They printed these articles, but nobody paid attention. It never penetrated. And I started thinking about that, and I thought about how difficult it is now, what's happening in America right now. We actually were shooting the movie when Trump was elected president, and I thought, wow, talk about the mainstream media trying to break through the lies and the propaganda. It's more difficult now than ever before.
And one of the reasons that I think it is more difficult now than ever before is because everything got muddied and gray due to this period of time.
Yes,
where you had the New York Times, you had the Washington Post just basically printing press releases by the administration.
Right.
The administration was lying as hard as they possibly could for reasons we don't understand. So nobody trusts anybody at this point.
Right.
Anymore.
I mean, people were caught up in, and rightly so, in the aftermath of 9/11. We were all patriots. We wanted to, get whoever got us. And the Bush administration very cleverly morphed the idea of Saddam Hussein and Iraq being responsible for 9/11, and they put out that propaganda. Now that happens all the time. Every administration, whether Democrat or Republican, you put out propaganda. You want to sell a policy or sell a rationale to go to war. But this one, we had everybody caught up in the patriotism. And most of the mainstream media didn't want to look like they were being unpatriotic, so they just bought the company line. They didn't do their due diligence, which is the one line to me that's the most important line in the whole film, which is when the government says something, you have only one question to ask. Is it true? That's the job of the journalist. And right now, we have that problem more than ever. And during the campaign, when Trump was running for office, again, the media didn't do their due diligence. They felt he wasn't going to get nominated or he wasn't going to win. Whatever the reason is, they didn't really focus on who this guy was and what he was doing.
Well, they felt no matter, I guess it's ridiculous of me to speak for they, but it seemed that the feeling was, as you said, he wasn't going to win, so thereby he was this crazy outlier. There's no reason to cover him with as much due diligence as there may be to cover and with as much kind of stipulation or speculation than there was to cover the Hillary campaign.
Right, and if you remember...
She's going to be president. She's going to be the powerful,
that's
so let's
right.
cover her as
So
such.
let's cover her and let's repeat this email story hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times, and that's all we heard. We heard Hillary Clinton and emails. That's all we heard. We're
still hearing it.
And we're still hearing it because Trump keeps pushing that narrative.
I think he tweeted yesterday, where's the server?
Yeah, where's those emails? I would posit something to you and to think about this. If we all said, if Trump was running for president, we had a man running for president, and all you heard was, there's a guy who fraudulently stole people's life savings in a fake university called Trump University. He was then sued in a class action suit and had to pay $25 million, not of his own money, but money he got from other people that went through his foundation, that he paid these people. So he didn't have to pay even his own money to pay off these people that he defrauded. And that's what you heard only about, this is the guy running for president. You might think differently about it, but it got that much attention, and it was buried amongst Access Hollywood and all kinds of other things.
I would not to argue with you on the stage where I'm interviewing you.
No, I love that.
I would argue,
Let's
and I think it goes back to something that you're showing here in Shock and Awe. that was covered, and I don't think people cared because they viewed them both as crooks, but one as a crook that they understood a little bit better. I saw a clip of someone in West Virginia during the Blankenship primary who said, 3 of my cousins were murdered in the coal mining accident that Blankenship was responsible for, but I'm still voting for Blankenship because he's a crook to your face.
Right.
And I think that says something
He's a good murderer.
It's less about the media at that point, and it's less about who we've become as Americans and how we view our officials.
Well, that might be part of it, and you may be right about that, but I would say to you that if you look how much Trump University and the fraud was covered, it was almost, I mean, Marco Rubio brought it up in one of the debates, and it was covered a little bit, but it never got the kind of attention that Hillary Clinton and emails got. Yeah. And when you talk about, leaking national security, because that was the idea, that these emails had national security implications, and when you look at this guy, I mean, he's just tweeting up a storm. He's telling Russians in the Oval Office,
people have fundraisers apparently
secrets.
Too.
They're telling, what are we talking about? The guy's leaking national security all over the place.
Yeah. But again, it goes back to who 35 to 40% of the voting base right now believes, and they believe their opinions, their feelings and their opinions, and their confirmation, or their all of their biases are confirmed by one media network and one person in the office, and it's very hard to burst through that bubble with any kind of truth.
Almost impossible. Almost impossible. The whole nature of active measures, which is disinformation campaigns that the Soviets ran and the Russians have been running. They've been running it for years, is to spread disinformation and keep hammering away at that until either the people who are receiving it accept it or they're so confused that they don't know what to do. 2 things. One is, you look at Malaysia Airlines. 80% of the Russian people believe that the Russians didn't shoot down that airplane because they spread all this disinformation. Now you add in social media and the power of social media. It's disinformation on steroids. And you're pushing that out to the people that you target, that you know are your supporters, and ultimately, it's impossible to penetrate them.
Well, not just because supporters put it out there, because people who don't like it retweet it and put it out there
yes.
as well. So often you see disinformation put out by people who don't believe it. They're all being like, look at how horrible this is, but it's still getting out there a little bit and
yes.
muddying the water.
Yes, but it's not just people who believe it or putting it out there. These are manufactured, to a large degree, trolls. There's a troll factory in St. Petersburg that puts out these tweets. They pick up on something a candidate says. It may be a lie. It will be wrong. But they'll retweet it, and send it out to the people that they know will accept this information. And these are people who were data mined through Cambridge Analytica and through Facebook. So you keep reading this and you think it's coming from people you know or whatever, and it's been, you've been mind hacked in a sense.
So I go back to this question again: what made us as a country so vulnerable to this moment? And I think it goes back to what you're covering in Shock and Awe, which is this period of time where the American people were so clearly failed by both its government and media at the same time, in the 1-2 punch of the Iraq War and the financial meltdown, the financial crisis of 2007.
I think you're hitting it, because if you think about the trust in the media went away. The trust in the government certainly went away when there were no weapons of mass destruction. There was no connection to 9/11. We were told that. The media told us that. The government told us that. So now, who do I believe? Who do I believe?
Myself. I believe the network that I've chosen to watch, and don't tell me anything else. I can't. I'm not going to deal with this shit anymore.
I think you're right.
So you said that you tried to write a kind of Dr. Strangelove satire at first.
At one point. Yeah.
What was that process like? Because that's a fascinating sort of idea after what I watched, which is in no way a satire.
No. I mean, I worked with Larry Gelbart, who's a brilliant writer who wrote Tootsie and created the series MASH, and a brilliant writer. We just couldn't get it right. I just thought it was so odd that there was this guy, Ahmed Chalabi, and they were putting this disinformation. There was a character named Curveball, and he was telling the Bush administration. It just seemed so weird that we would go to war based on nothing. There was There was an episode, I mean, there are people in this room that are much too young, maybe, I don't know if there's anybody my age, but there was a show called The Phil Silver Show, Sergeant Bilko. And they had an episode where an ape went into the army. And it was like, that's ridiculous. That can't possibly happen. How can an ape get in the army? And yet, what they did was they created a fantasy, or it seemed like a fantasy, of how this could happen. And now we've got a guy who was a failed businessman, who was a reality TV show host, and he's now the president of the United States. So it's like you can't make this stuff up.
That's true, but I think we go back to what people remember, and even just seeing the clip of Rumsfeld in a press conference say, there are known knowns, there are known unknowns, there are unknown knowns, and then there are unknown unknowns, which is clearly just someone obfuscating and trying to muddy the waters as much as possible.
Yeah, Giuliani today. You listen to anything Giuliani says, you don't know what the hell he's talking about.
We watch Giuliani now, and we watch Trump now, and we go, how could this be? Oh my God, this is crazy. It's never been like this. And it's like, no, only like 10, 12 years ago, it was kind of like that with the Bush administration.
Yes, and you're exactly right. And I was saying the difference is the media did help them in spreading this, this propaganda. But now you have the media, that was supposed to be a check. The media is supposed to say, is it true? They didn't. Now you've got essentially with Breitbart and Fox and Sinclair and Alex Jones, essentially state-run media, where you have a wing of the extension of the Trump administration basically fine to spread the lies, just throw the lies out there.
State-run media, except Alex Jones is like state-run media mixed with sort of personal exorcisms on camera. I don't know if you've ever seen
it's
that.
conspiracy theories, and then Trump either repeats them, or, he started out his whole political career on a conspiracy, crazy idea that, that Barack Obama's not a legitimate president because he wasn't born in the United States. He went with that for 5 years.
Yeah, well, he was just trying to get famous off of something that he made no sense.
It's all about fame to him. It's all about serving himself. Whatever he can do to serve himself, that's what he's doing.
So I'm gonna ask because you're incredibly tuned in, and it seems like you're always paying attention, which is a good thing. I am too. How do you wind down? Do you? Can you?
I don't think I ever do wind down. I mean, it's so crazy.
Right?
I've been married 29 years, and my wife Michelle and I, we're both obsessed with what's going on, and we'll be sleeping, wake up in the middle. But wait a minute, Manafort didn't, whatever it is. You're still, how could Manafort have done,
You going to jail today? Is that happening?
I don't know if he's going today. I think what they're doing is first of all, he's been indicted again. Yeah, a new indictment on the witness tampering and his connection to this guy Kilimnik, who is a Russian intelligence. I mean, he was connected to
GRU, right?
GRU guy was connected to Russian intelligence, and who was Manafort's guy in the Ukraine and in Russia for a million years. Yeah. And he was the guy that he was talking to that were trying to get witnesses to change their stories to help Manafort. So Kilimnik's been indicted, and Manafort's been indicted again, and then next week the judge is going to determine whether or not Manafort has to go they're going to undo his bail agreement and maybe put him in jail.
So you don't find that you need to wind down? You need to find time to not think about it?
I do the crossword puzzle.
Good.
That's my way of
I get worried
getting
sometimes.
calm. At the end of the night, I go and do the crossword puzzle. It calms me down.
Because I follow you on Twitter. I get worried sometimes.
I know. It gets a little hopped up. There, yeah.
So this satire script doesn't necessarily work. When do you find this current script for Shock and Awe and find that this story works?
Well, when I saw this documentary by Bill Moyers, I saw these 4 journalists, and I went, that's my way into the story. That these guys were on the trail of trying to find the truth as to why we went to war in Iraq, and I thought that's the way to tell the story.
No one would listen to them. No one would publish them.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting, and it's like a cautionary tale. At the end, they don't stop the war. I mean, their job, their motive wasn't to try to stop the war. They just wanted to get the truth out so that the war, people would make the decision to not go to war. So that was the way into it. And we luckily had four, Woody Harrelson, myself, James Marsden, and Tommy Lee Jones are the four journalists. And we had the actual guys on the set with us. First of all, they helped us with the screenplay. And they were on the set every day, so there was nothing, that we did that they said, well, that didn't happen or that did happen.
What was that like to hanging out with them and talking to them? How do they talk about that period of time? Was it maddening for them as well?
Yes, it was maddening. They did something very interesting, and they talked about this. They talked to the main, people in the administration, but they also had a lot of low-level sources. They had sources that were not the top echelon, but people that were willing to tell the truth. They didn't go necessarily on record, but they were on background, and they were able to figure out, these were patriots. These were people who recognized that the Bush administration had decided to go to war, and then they were looking for the intelligence to support that. It wasn't an active process of trying to find the truth of the intelligence, because if you read the intelligence estimate, there's all kinds of caveats that said we don't know, because we had not had real intelligence on the ground for 4 years. After the inspectors were kicked out, there was a 4-year period. We didn't know what Saddam Hussein was doing. So that was the whole point of Hans Blix going in from the United Nations and trying to find that out. And every month he'd report back and saying, no, I haven't found anything. And so rather than leave him in Iraq to see if there ultimately were or were not weapons, which we would have found out that they weren't, they yanked him out of there and they went to war anyway. And this was something they planned on doing even before 9/11. There's a thing called the Project for the New American. They've been getting in the weeds here, but there was a thing. There was a thing called the Project for the New American Century that was written by some neocons, Wolfowitz, Pearl, Feith, a number of people from the American Enterprise Institute. These were people who, after the Soviet Union fell, they realized that America was the last remaining superpower. What were we going to do with the power that we now had in terms of furthering democracy and our way of life and, spreading that word around the world? They determined that if they could put a Western-style democracy in the Middle East, that would hopefully proliferate and then help Israel. And that was the idea. So the idea to go to war in Iraq was decided even before 9/11, and then they used 9/11 as a way to motivate the public as to going to war there. That was their theory. And it was always confusing to me because these are very intelligent guys, Wolfowitz, and they're not dummies. And I thought, didn't they read their history? I mean, don't they know that, that the Shia and the Sunni have been at war with each other for 1,400 years. After the death of Muhammad, they tried to determine who was the likely heir, and that's what was going on. And that area of the world was held together by an iron fist in Saddam Hussein. There wasn't a country. They didn't have countries in the Middle East. This was territories that were marked out after the First World War by the British and the French. And so in this area, you had the Kurds, you had the Shia, and you had Sunnis. And they were living together because Saddam Hussein was a brutal, iron-fisted dictator. And the minute you removed him, why didn't they think that there was going to unleash this sectarian war, which it did, and it created ISIS. And so that we kind of knew was going to happen, and I always wondered why those guys didn't think that that would happen.
Did you ever get an answer?
No, I have never gotten an answer, because you always heard, we'll be greeted as liberators. I mean, we had Saddam Hussein in a box. We had a no-fly zone. We had inspectors on the ground, and he was
sanctions upon sanctions,
sanctions, and we had he was a bulwark against Iran. The whole idea was that we didn't want Iran to get the power, and Saddam Hussein was a bulwark. Well, if you got 60% Shia in Iraq, and Iran is a Shia country, well, guess what happens? Yeah. Guess what happens?
Yeah, we sort of lost that battle. Iran and Russia are becoming the superpowers of the Middle East.
Right, right. And somebody made this theory, and I don't know, I think it was Jonathan Landay, one of the journalists. He said that that he always thought Ahmed Chalabi, this is the guy who was the head of the Iraqi National Congress, who was going to go in and take over for Saddam Hussein. And this is the guy that the Bush administration propped up. They gave them money and all this stuff. They said that secretly he was in line with Iran more than anything else as a way of gaining power. I'm not sure that that's true. I don't know if that's true. But that was the theory he posited.
Any way to get power. He was like, sure.
Yeah, I'll go there. I'll hook up with Iran. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious. The story that you just told, the history of Iraq and 1,400 years ago, the Sunni and the Shia, is told in the movie by Jessica Biel at a dinner scene. She has sort of recently done her research and showing off on a date to James Marsden. What made you put all of those words in that moment in that character's mouth, and also in the women's mouth in the movie? Mia Jovovich and her both have moments of very clear ideas about the history.
Right. The thing that all filmmakers have is, if you have information that you want to get out, exposition, how do you do it in a graceful way that doesn't sound like a clunky guy just explaining stuff? So we had these, and it's a true story that the two of them met on, James Marsden and Jessica Biel's character. They met during this run-up, and now they're married. But they met and started dating, and I thought, what a great way for their first date, for her to have boned up on what this guy has been writing and has been Googling and trying to find out what he did, and she is able to lay out everything she learned about what he wrote. And I thought that was a kind of an interesting and fun way to get all this information out.
You also have Woody Harrelson's wife in the film, Mia Jovovich, present, and I talked to you about this a little bit in the green room, present the idea that the nationalism we were seeing in America post 9/11 was something that she was fearful of coming from the former Yugoslavia, because it led to decades of civil war, in her opinion. How did it feel having that line being said in the midst of shooting this during the campaign, which felt during the campaign and even after it, we are in some sort of cultural civil war?
It was bizarre. This is surreal. The whole thing is surreal. This movie that we made, that I thought about making 15 years ago, it's weirdly resonant and with what's going on now. It's a bizarre kind of thing. I mean, the character that Mila Jovovich plays, Vlatka, in there, she was from Yugoslavia, and she did remember what her country went through, and she started to see this kind of thing happening here. She was very paranoid. She was also worried that they were spying on her husband, and that, that people were going to do something bad to him.
Do you feel like we're in the middle of somewhat of a civil war right now? Obviously not as bloody and violent as a civil war.
It's not bloody or violent, obviously, but thank God. But I do believe that Trump has unearthed a racism that's always been in this country. It's one of our original sins. It's been here forever, and he basically let it bubble up to the surface. He gave it a megaphone, a bullhorn, and basically said, it's okay. And a lot of people who are very angry at the first African-American president were reacting to that and saying, we want our country back, make America white again, essentially, and didn't like the idea of the browning of America. So, yes, I do think that we are in it's. I like to think of it, hopefully, the last battle of the Civil War. Like, we're fighting this moment where we're gonna face racism head on. Because we have a president that is clearly racist, only pushes racism, good people on both sides, shithole countries, look, here's my African-American over here. I mean, everything he says is to keep, it's not like a dog whistle anymore. It's like a dog bullhorn,
Sort of psychotic nationalism as well. Like a racism, but I would say a psychotic nationalism that's based in a sort of deep belief in the zero-sum game of capitalism that they all kind of seem to play out in. Whether they're winners or not, they seem to be grasping on to that as much as possible.
Yeah. And you wonder why they're so comfortable with the idea of him being in bed with Putin. They love that. It's like all white people over there. I mean, we're white, they're white, everybody's white. It's all okay, it's all going to be okay. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine him wanting Putin to be back in the G7? nations. I mean, it's crazy.
Feeling comfortable saying that publicly. Either his brain is broken and he doesn't know what he's saying, or he's trolling all of us because he knows he's going to get a headline.
I don't know, except that, he's, like I say, he's in bed with Putin. He denigrates our closest allies, Great Britain, Germany, Canada, Mexico, the EU, the NATO, and he loves Putin and Duterte and Erdogan and all these, authoritarian dictators.
I mean, according to the smartest geopolitical minds, he is doing everything in Putin's playbook.
He is.
Somehow people still don't believe
he's a dream come true for Putin. I mean, this is, Putin's desire is to weaken democracy around the world so that his way of doing things, this authoritarian way, rises to the surface. After the Soviet Union collapsed, he came along and tried to find a way to, build it back up. That's why he goes into Crimea. That's why he's into Ukraine. That's why he's looking to weaken the European Union and NATO. And that's why you see Brexit. It's the same playbook of, spreading this idea that those people over there are taking your way of life away from you.
I think we should go to audience questions.
Why not?
This point right
Why
here.
not?
Hi, I'm Joe, and as you know, and as you know, you've had lots of success across multiple genres of film, and I was wondering how different, if there's any difference, is your approach to each film?
It's totally different. I mean, there is a grammar, a cinematic film grammar to every movie you make. I mean, if I'm making a fantasy, like a Princess Bride kind of thing, or satire like a Spinal Tap, or Misery, which is a thriller, it has a certain way that you tell the story. I mean, you can't approach each one of these films the same way. Or if it's just a character-based film like When Harry Met Sally, or, courtroom drama, A Few Good Men, you approach it with a certain kind of, like I say, a grammar for that kind of film.
Do you do research into the kind of films like that have been made before? Like, I imagine you going into A Few Good Men and looking at some Sidney Lumet or something.
Well, I looked at
lines.
all courtroom films. I looked at Inherit the Wind, Anatomy of a Murder, Judgment at Nuremberg, any film that had courtroom scenes. I did look at that, and when I did Misery, I looked at all of Hitchcock's stuff. Anything that was like a thriller, to see, how they do it, and then you do it your own way. But there's a, you can learn from this.
Right, it's at least giving you some ideas for solutions when you get in the pocket and are a little.
And like Hitchcock, you're looking at the most brilliant thriller director of all time.
You literally wrote the book.
Yeah.
Next question.
Hi, I'm Julia.
Hi, how are you?
Good, how are you? So you've worked in television and film, and I'm wondering which you feel is better for sharing a political message.
I think television is probably better because it's more immediate. I mean, if you're interested in politics and entertainment, you watch John Oliver or Bill Maher or, Seth Meyers or Stephen Colbert, and it's topical. It's, whatever's happening right then and there, you can deal with it. Films, you have to know that it's a year out, 2 years out, that you have to do more of a general zeitgeist of what that was, and you never know when the film comes out if it's going to resonate, if it's going to be, connected. Oddly enough, this is something about a story that's, 15 years old, but yet because it's the struggle of the press to break through with the truth, you can see how that resonates. But I think television probably, I would say.
One more, right here.
Hi.
Yeah, hi.
Nice to see you. So last year we had the pleasure of seeing you do your footprint with your father.
Oh yeah, with my dad, yeah.
And the love was so tremendous.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, is there any philosophy or thing that resonates with you when either moves you forward, some saying that your father's given you a philosophy, anything that you kind of turn to when you're working or personally?
That's a great question because everybody always says, here I did pick the same line of work that my dad did. Right. And, I've had these conversations with Michael Douglas. There's a very few people whose parents succeed at a very high level, and the children also did really well. I mean, you can count them on one hand. There's not many that have that. And it is a big challenge to do that. But I was lucky that I had a father. It wasn't a specific thing he said to me, but how he conducted his life. I saw how he treated other people, how he, orchestrated his career, and I thought, okay, that's pretty cool. And this is a story that I've been told I did. I don't remember it because I was very young. I think I was 7 or 8 years old. And I went to my parents and I told them I wanted to change my name. And my father was thinking, oh my God, this poor kid, he feels the burden of being in the shadow of a famous father. And oh God, And then he said, well, what do you want to change it to? And I said, Carl. So I always wanted to be like him. I admired him. I looked up to him, and so I wanted to be like him.
Rob, congratulations on the new film,
Thank
Shock
you.
and Awe. A wonderful job yet again.
Thank you.
I think that's all that you can do.
Thank you.
The film will be on Shock and Awe will be on DirecTV June 15th, right?
No, DirecTV on June 14th.
June 14th, excuse me.
And then in the theaters on July 13th.
Rob Reiner, everybody. Let's hear it.
Thank you. Thank you.